Sarah Schwartz. Welcome to the Retail Whore Podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. As a nerd, of course I want to hang out with a whore.
Oh my God, I never even thought about that. I love that. Oh my God, you just totally took me out. I am so excited to meet you via Zoom. We were introduced by Amy from New York Now. We were both influencers for the New York Now show, even though I don't really think I'm an influencer, but I never got a chance to meet you in person. I think our paths were crossing the entire show. So it's so nice to have you here and meet you via Zoom.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And yes, I feel like as much as I love going to markets, there's like a certain, I think post-COVID, there's just like a certain frenetic quality where you're just being pulled in like 1,000 directions from beginning till end. And you miss a lot of connections, unfortunately, as a result.
Yeah, this one I had more time to do that show because I shopped it for a couple people, but for the most part, I was left to roam on my own, which is I'm not used to. So it was really nice to be able to go through New York Now and like not be like crazed and not be like having to write orders and, just kind of thoughtfully walk through the bulletin venue and just kind of it was great. But I wished I had run into even Red Boot Gal, I ran into her in the elevator. That's the only way I met her.
I know we'll have to schedule some kind of a meetup, an in-person meetup, even if it's just for a quick cup of coffee or a drink or something.
I would love that. You are a magazine editor, a writer, podcaster, consultant, and self-proclaimed paper nerd. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, I got into, I started covering stationery for gifts and decorative accessories, which is, known as the Bible of the gift industry. I started in 1997. So the last century. And it it's an amazing category. I think it just keeps getting more exciting. It was something I was assigned when I started at Gibson Deck all those years ago. At that point, they were in the New York Life Building, and I covered that and a few other markets. And I think stationery just got under my skin. And a couple times my career's gone in other directions, and just like the mob, it just keeps pulling me back in.
You have a podcast. You're a magazine editor for Gibson Deck.
Oh no, I started at Gibson Deck, and then we founded Stationery Trends. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary, if you
Oh
can
my
believe
gosh.
it.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I know it is crazy. We founded it. Our first issue was spring 2008. So like we started just as a million magazines were going under.
Wow.
And we're just very lucky that I'd like to say that we have the one audience that really appreciates print.
I've said it before. I said it when Julie was on the podcast. Like I am obsessed with magazines and paper as well. But for me, like I'm tactile. I need like even catalogs. Now that catalogs are moving into digital, I can't because I cherry pick lines. So it's really hard to do digitally, and magazines for me have always been my biggest source of inspiration. So I am slightly freaking out because during the pandemic it was like really like, are they going away? Because it's always been kind of, now that everything's going digital, it's always been kind of like you can kind of see it tapering off. Different magazines are closing house, and I really honestly was like somewhat panicked when the pandemic happened and like there was no production at all. I'm like, oh my God. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough time to be a magazine publisher right now, obviously. I mean, like, you could ask our CEO, who's always like, the cost of paper is 20% up. And, it's just, we're having supply chain issues as well. But at the same time, everybody likes having, a physical object, to carry with them. And, several years ago, we used to do paper proofs when I started. I've always telecommuted. They're in Michigan, I'm in Ohio. And we used to literally FedEx proofs, like we would mark up proofs and
oh my
FedEx
gosh.
one person to another. And yes, which is crazy. And then about 10 years ago, we made the switch to doing all proofing online, and you could write on it and everybody sees it, but still, there's still things I miss that I don't notice until I get the physical issue in my hand.
Oh,
We do lose something going from object to screen still, I think. And I think, people appreciate an object. It's great having a magazine to pick up at a market and look through, while you're going here and there in your room that night. It's just, I don't know. There's something about it, especially a nicely put together
oh my
magazine,
gosh.
that should be like taking a nice ride,
Yep.
through design.
So, okay, this is a total sideline, but what is your favorite magazine? I'm interested in what your favorite trade publication, not trade publication, but magazine.
Other publications, like
Yeah.
I read a lot of the shelter mags. I like House Beautiful. I tend to get really inspired by those. When we started Stationery Trends, it is so crazy to think it was 15 years ago. I really sat down with, House Beautiful. I really just went to Barnes and Noble and I picked all the home and design magazines I liked. I figured our readership is reading them
Mhm.
and this is what they're looking at. How can I tell, sort of more traditional trade stories through this vein? So that's always, what I've tried to do with the publication, and our readers really like it. And the other thing is, I think, we're a design pub. People like looking at pretty pictures, and
Yeah.
we don't need a lot of, I mean, we need some copy, but it should be more visually driven. So I've always tried to do that. We're all in retail. We like to look at stuff,
Oh my God. I visually, I mean, you guys do such a good job of both, like, I forget which one it was, but I remember like, this is like so good. I mean, it's rare that, not to say it's rare, but trade publications are different, obviously, than the main house publications. So yours, it was like so beautiful. Some of your layouts were so beautiful. It was like, I was like, okay, this feels like a magazine. This feels like one of those yummy, juicy, tear things out magazines, which was great.
My gosh. Well, thank you so much. That's so kind of you to say. And I try to do that. I try to make it so that when it arrives in our readership's mailboxes, their stores, instead of a home mag where you're seeing all the newest stuff for your home, you're seeing all the
Yeah.
latest trends for your store, articulated. I definitely try to tell a story with images, the same way a retailer builds a really nice vignette.
Yep.
And um,
Storytelling.
it's all about the story,
Yep.
It always was, but it's even more so, I think, since COVID. And we are stuck looking at screens all day.
Oh my God. I luckily my job does not have, like, this is as much time as I spend on my laptop. Most of it is through magazine catalogs and whatnot. And I think during COVID, I think I would have lost my mind because I'm not that girl. It's
Oh, yeah. I mean, when trade shows stopped, like I was sort of like losing my mind for a while. They're trying to trend watch through screens. It was just so hard to do. And for you and I, like I need to see the product. I need to go to market and pick it up and see it, So often a photo does not do a product justice. Sometimes the product's a lot better, sometimes it's a lot worse,
yeah.
until you see the dimensions and the materials and the context. It's really hard to tell. And for a retailer who's investing their open to buy dollars in it, these are important decisions, and they can really hurt your business if you make a misstep.
Well, that's what, like, with Fair and like the online platforms, to buying, I mean, I love them, don't get me wrong, but I always wonder, like, how do you buy candles and how do you buy personal care and stuff like that from it? Because to me, it's texture of a lotion, it's the scent of a candle, it's all of that. It's like the other stuff is like, it's fine, I mean, it's easy, but I always wonder, like, how do you do that? And obviously all of us were stuck doing that for a couple of years, but in the same breath, it's like, I need to see it, feel it, touch it, smell it.
Totally. I am the same way. I mean, I've got to assume that people were just kind of once you found a good vendor that was like commensurate with your vibe, or whatever, that you would stick to them. But yeah, in terms of finding a new one, yeah, I mean, like, I've gotten samples of candles that look so beautiful online, and they're very expensive. And then you get it and the scent's kind of gross. In fact, that just happened to me last night. I was burning a candle while I was doing a bar class, and I thought something was on fire. Like, it was a bad smell.
Yeah, I'm a weirdo from that. Like, but it's let's just say I'm happy that we're back to relatively normal days. Do you also have a store?
No,
What's
no,
the
I don't.
five-star stationery salon?
I don't know. That's not me. I mean, I would like to. I thought about doing that a lot online. Like, because on the Paper Nerd, like, I show cards and and products so often. I've often thought, like, if I could showcase a lot of what what I featured, and even just link to their stores, I would totally do that, just in the name of, like, driving the category. But I've never really explored that. I'm really, I guess, for lack of a better term, like a traditionally trained journalist. Like, I'm a writer, who sort of taught myself podcasting. So the digital world is still, like, very, a little intimidating to me. And whatever I try, I need someone to really take me through and hold my hand. Learning podcast, I mean, doing a podcast was like, for me, it was just like such a huge risk, because I'm just so used to writing articles and
Yeah,
controlling every element of
yeah.
what I create.
It's funny. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I decided I mean, this started because we were doing lives during pandemic shutdown, and I was just reaching out to retailers live on Instagram and like, how are you doing? And we have so many people tuning in, and so many people like, oh my gosh, I wish you'd do more. And then I went back to work and forgot about it, and then decided, okay, I'm going to start a podcast. And it's like, true to Michelle style, like, I just jump without even even knowing what the hell I'm doing. And thank God I don't know if you've heard much of the podcast, but I am self-proclaimed. I am not tech whatsoever, like, at all. Like, I am very, I am creative, and I can do merchandising, design, display, all that. But when it comes to something like this, like, and I knew, so Elisa, who's my best friend, is our digital marketing manager. And then I hired an editor, Catherine, who's amazing. Like, she's super, I mean, she's young and she has her own podcast. So I knew to put those pieces in play. But other than that, it's literally like I said to somebody on the podcast a couple of days ago, like, I must be meant to do this just because since third grade, my report cards have come back. She talks too much. And it's like, I finally feel like, all right, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's very much like, it's unscripted. We just talk. It just goes off. There's F-bombs that, I mean, with the name like retail horror, like but I will say it's been the best experience. I mean, this, like, I really feel like this is what I'm meant to do. I mean, at this point in my career of being I mean, I've been in retail for 40 plus years. So, but this feels like this is what I'm meant to do and talk about. And so tell me, when you started your podcast, like, it was all based on stationery.
Yes, yes. And, and I think I sort of had a similar thing that happened with this podcast as with the publication. It takes you a while to find your legs and
Yeah.
find okay, this is what my audience likes, and this is what they don't like, and this is what they want to hear, and this is what they don't want to hear. So yeah, I mean, really, it was definitely a COVID project. But I think what it boils down to, and I said, and I sort of hear it from you as well, people are feeling so isolated, and they miss those conversations. When I used to go to a million markets, I would have, I'd stop at everybody's booth, and we'd chat each other up, and there was so much interesting ground we covered, and but it was always somewhat private. And now, we're bringing these conversations into sort of the public domain, and it's really interesting, for people who feel isolated, who feel like they're missing out on shows and markets, and who also, like, for lack of a better term, want to be in the room, like, want to hear, what different people have to say about different topics. I mean, this is such an interesting time in retail, gift, and stationery
Yeah.
that there's a lot to talk about.
The Paper Fold is your podcast, and then you
Yes,
also do one with
with
Amy.
Amy. Now that's on hiatus, but I did it with New York Now, the Paper Planes Cocktail Hour. Amy and I had so much fun
I
doing it.
love the premise of that. Talk a little bit about that.
So, we would just, we would have different players on both retail and, um, and more makers. I think, and then for 2022, we started with like people in the beginning of their trajectory for the first quarter, and then second, third, and fourth quarters, we like looked at people as they moved through the trajectory, like
Oh,
of.
interesting.
So that was kind of interesting. I mean, we had so many amazing people on it, and I think Amy and I took such different approaches that it was really interesting to have like Chandra Greer or Dan Collier from Daniel Richards. Those were like really, really popular episodes. We also had, oh my gosh, why
Michael
can I
Precursive.
not? Yeah, and why can't I not remember the pencil lady's name? She just the pencil store in New York. I mean, that Caroline.
Wait, there's a pencil store?
Well, she closed it. I hate to say it,
Oh,
but it was. She had
and
it
it's
in the Lower
all
East
pencils?
Side. It was all pencils. I think she brought in notebooks, and
Wow, that's amazing.
it was amazing. It was amazing. I mean, and it's really sad that it closed because I think the world needs a pencil store.
Oh, okay. I will say this, like, when I heard your love and your paper nerd story, and it's funny because it feels like letter writing is very much, how do you say this? It's very much an old school style of communication. And I still like, I still like this. Some of the stores that I consult with, I will say, instead of sending email, instead of sending a text, why don't you send a card? Because there's nothing more that somebody's going to remember than opening their mailbox. Because guarantee you right now, it makes me insane how many people, vendors and reps text me. It makes me insane. And now with WhatsApp, I don't, I'm on WhatsApp. I don't even know why, because it's like, it's just another way
It's
of
like
communicating. It's like
it's
another
another,
text. It's like, just
it's
text.
another
I mean,
place to miss messages.
it's
Like,
so, it's seriously. So, you know, I was like, instead of doing that, because most people are just passing them by, and emails, like, forget it, you get a million. I mean, but the idea of like opening a card from somebody, a store, to say thank you so much, it was great meeting you, blah blah blah, like, as a customer service element, I love. But I honestly, like, I'm gonna you're gonna laugh because I'm gonna show you. This is my
ooh, I'm impressed.
I don't know why I'm such I and I don't even draw, but I have more colored pens, pencils. I have like this weird obsession with those jelly style pens. I have a million journals that some I use, some I don't, but I am obsessed with paper. And when I read that that's your obsession as well, I'm like, what is it about that? And is it a form of communication that's going to go away, or do you feel like it's going to grow?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, is it ever going to take over the world again? Probably not, but I think it's a great way to differentiate yourself, either on a personal level or on a business level. If you're familiar with the brand Kitty Meow Boutique,
Yes, we had her. I love her.
Had Cat. I mean, she's got cards like that you send if you sign a new client, like, hey, thanks, so excited to do business, so excited to work with you.
Yeah,
Like, who would I want to get that from a service provider I hire,
yeah.
like that they took the time, they wrote down my address, they did all that. I have to say, if you are interested in you know, and and on a personal level as well, I think, we are in a time of great kind of social upheaval. People are challenging everything, and what better way to connect with people, especially someone going through something, than a letter? Like these days, there are cards for sobriety, there are cards for, gender
Divorce.
fluidity, divorce. Yeah, you name it, there's a card for it. But I have to say, I had Chelsea Shuko from Sugar Paper on my podcast. They wrote a book, How to Write a Letter. It's like a guidebook. Let me see if I can find it. I definitely have it in my office. But she sent me this amazing address book after, and she was like, you really have to start taking that extra minute when you get a letter from someone,
Oh,
put it in your address book, because that's the challenge for most people, is that digging up the address. And
oh,
so
I'm the worst.
yeah, so I keep it by my desk, and you put it in. You can even put in birthdays if you really want to be organized, and then you can look at the beginning of each month and be like, oh, it's Jimmy's birthday, or whatever.
And I know every millennial, or not millennial, every Gen X is like, that's what your Google Calendar's for. But I am pen and paper. I have to have it. Even my calendar is literally, I have to see it in one picture,
Yes.
where I am, what I'm doing. And I have yet to find a digital calendar that I can do that with. That's not this big, because at
Right.
57, I can't see shit anymore. So,
Are you a planner person then? So you must have
um,
a good plan. Or do you have a good planner? Yeah, you have a great planner. You
yes,
look organized.
ma'am. I am like the planner queen, but I mean, because I'm booked out 8 months in advance. So I have to be able to sit there and go month to month and plan the retailers that I'm in their stores every other month. And then I have to be able to plan 2 sets of gift shows, holiday setups. And if I can't flip back and forth easily, same thing as a catalog. If I can't flip back and forth easily, it's too, for me in my ADD, it's too challenging. So I am like forever going to be a pen and paper girl. Like I just,
I think so. And I think there are a lot of people like that who still need it in front of them. And me, not only do I have a planner, I have a daily planner, but I have to coordinate it with my family calendar. Like a lot of people have kids, like, oh, we have to be here, and I'm doing
yeah,
this with my husband, and
yeah.
oh, we planned a vacation. Like it gets crazy. And as much as I really want to simplify my life, it just seems to be getting more and more complicated. And
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because we're on paper. I have to say, like, one of the biggest, to me, one of the biggest departments, even though I just proposed that question, is cards. And all of my retailers, when we pull numbers and we're looking at what's driving the sales, I will admit that I was kind of shocked on how much cards drive the business. And one thing I will say to the retailers out there that don't sell it is, what a couple of stores that I've opened, they've had negative space, and it's been like literally space right next to their front door that you can't really put a lot of product next to because of the fact of shoplifting. But it makes such a great place to do card placement in the plexiglass, sleeves that hold it on the wall. And the amount of real estate you're able to put and generate money from what's usually a quote dead space is
Mhm.
amazing. And then a couple floating racks. It is incredible how much profit and how much money cards drive.
I know it is crazy when you think of it, like how much people spend and say a trade show booth for like a product that wholesales for 225 a pop, but at retail, first of all, I mean, there are so many amazing card walls out there. Like, I do think retailers should experiment with the idea of incorporating a card wall into their store design that they can easily update. What can you do with cards? I mean, you can bring in makers of color if you feel like, I'm not my the lines I'm buying from are not representative enough. You can bring in ideas, you can bring in colors, you can bring in, different print formats, you can bring in artisanal stuff, you can bring in, cause related merchandise, and all very pretty easily.
Yeah.
The I mean, within stationery, it's been very exciting to see, Barnes and Noble recently has made
Yes.
huge
Yes.
investment. And then what is the others? Meyer, a lot of my little maker friends were sending big orders to Meyer. Is it
What's
Mayer?
Meyer? Mayer.
Meyer. It's
I
one
don't
of those.
think they're in the West Coast.
Yeah, they're not, but they made some huge, huge orders. So it's like if the big boxes are delving into this category, it's got legs, and it's important. As inflation affects more and more of us, well, okay, I can't afford that pair of Gucci slides I've been dreaming of, but hey, I can splurge on like a really, really nice personal stationery set that's, hand letter pressed or hand foiled, or the edges are painted. You can kind of like scratch that consumer itch in a more reasonable way.
Yeah, you talked about Chelsea, and Chelsea and I had a conversation right when the podcast first started, and her talking about her space that she has at Target. And even Target, with the investment that they're like huge, massive spaces for like sugar paper, for other brands that they've created whole in-shop shops. It's crazy. That's
Yeah,
where you really know when the big box are really like starting to do almost pop-up shops within their stores.
totally. And Target did an amazing job with sugar paper. And I think I could be wrong, but I believe that it might have been for holiday 2022, sugar was the first one that they actually made a like corrugated display for. Like they had never done that for
Yeah,
gift wrap. I found that I have to give a plug to Chelsea's book. I found it. It's How to Write a Letter. It's by Chelsea and her partner, Jamie Grobecker, and it is published by Potter. It's part of a series, like a how-to series, but it's an amazing book. And if you are interested in upping your letter writing game and like really knocking people out with your correspondence, like it's a wonderful place to start. One thing I didn't
put a
mention.
link in the show notes for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I forgot to mention about the benefits of writing a letter, it's so funny. A lot of times you put a lot of thought into a letter and you write it, and we're so busy. I forget it. I forget about it. And then the person is like, oh my gosh, you wrote me such a nice note. And it's like I experience it again because I'm so old, I forgot about sending it already. You're
You are
like,
not old.
then we get to experience this wonderful moment. Letter writing is very cool, or card writing, again, across time and space. It hits in a different way than we're used to in a digital world.
Can you explain for those who don't know what letterpress is and the difference between letterpress and mass production, I guess is
Sure,
the.
sure, sure. So at first, everything was engraved. If you, it was before printing, things were engraved. And to engrave something, you hear of engraved wedding invitations, for example. And like for engraving, they have to make a plate, and it's pushed into the paper. They would print it, and so you can tell if you get a wedding invitation and it looks fancy and you're not sure if it's engraved or thermography, which is poor man's engraving. You turn it over, and there should be, it's called a bruise on the back, but you can
Erased.
see, yeah, you can see where the paper is pushed through the plate and inked. So letterpress is the opposite of engraving, and it was founded by Johann Gutenberg, and it actually brought us out of the Dark Ages because it's movable type. So instead of having to make a whole plate, you could, write anything you wanted, print it out, and then change it and print something
Oh,
else out. So with letterpress, instead of it coming up through the back, it's pressed into the pages. So you can feel the indentation. And it was actually like the main printing method, I believe, until World War II, when offset became, or flat printing sort of took over. And so that was a real schism. And then, in the late, and then digital printing, is just flat printing. Anything can be digital printed. Photography, we see a lot. And so it can be done very well. There's obviously very good digital printing, and there's not so good digital printing, but letterpress has it's almost always on cotton paper, so it's the paper has a certain feel to it.
Mm.
It's made from recycled cotton scraps, and it has a bite to it. And because it's a technique, there's a million ways to do it. It can be trendy to use a real thick paper and make a deep bite. That was super trendy for a while, whereas if you're a traditional letterpresser, like, that's not considered quality. Like, to them,
Mm.
you would want it on a shallow bite on the paper. There's like a whole thing about the bed of ink. I've heard it said that it takes 10 minutes to learn letter pressing and a lifetime to master. So it's really a whole
Well, I
it's
think it helps explain to people, because I think there's pushback sometimes. Like, I've been in booths and I've heard pushback on, why is this so expensive? And it's like,
right.
well, it's letterpress. It's not digital. It's not digital. And I don't think people understand that it's somewhat of a lost art form that, is not done on every single. And so it does cost more, but just what you're saying is the cotton paper and the weight of it feels different in your hand than a traditional printed card.
Absolutely. It's just more substantial, and it kind of, it's a little retro, but depending on the artist, it can feel very forward thinking. The other thing is that every color that you print has to be run through the press individually. And
Oh, so it's like a screen printing almost.
yes, yes, and the registration for how the colors line up, that's a art form. Like, you can mess that up too.
Wow.
So, like, there's one maker that's a wonderful friend of mine, Kate Murray of Quick Brown Fox Letterpress, and her thing is she likes to run it through like 7 or 8 times. I mean, it's a design exercise for her. But it's, her work definitely bridges the gap between, a product and art in a way that a lot of other products don't.
I do you follow Erin from HQ Stationery?
Yes, yes, she's amazing, and she works with
I
so
love
many.
her. We had her on the podcast. Her episode was actually last week. But she had a post, and it was a handful of cards, and it was, one of those quizzes, guess how many cards. But you could see how thick those invitations were that she was printing. They were so thick. They were beautiful. And it was that, just, that's the first thing I thought of when I thought about, like, like the cotton paper and the thickness of it, and, like, wedding invitations where you get that hefty, beautiful piece. That's not to mention 18 pieces of paper with all the cards and the response.
My gosh, there was one maker out of, I mean, wedding invitations are coming back, fortunately. Like, that's such a great segment of the business, and I love seeing it. But I thought it was so funny. There's another friend of mine, Allison O'Connor, Rust Belt Love Papery in Buffalo, New York, who works with a lot of brides. And like, she showed me one of her suites that was like for it was for like a spring 2020 wedding. So it was the wedding invitation, then it was like, then they did a letterpress postponement postcard, then they did a letterpress postponement cancellation postcard, then they did
Oh my
another,
God.
it was like, it ended up being like 30 pieces, but all within the same theme. And then, like, finally at the end, I think they got married privately and had a party. But it was so cool to see that story told through exquisite stationery. And hopefully the couple's still married. That's all
That
I
just made me think about my first wedding's cards. And it's like, Oh my God. I mean, I just remember it was like, yeah, the invitation and then the pre-event and then the response RSVP card and then another envelope for something else. And I mean, I hate saying this, but because we're obviously not together anymore, but I think about like I should have just saved my money and just
Oh my gosh.
my
I
husband and I this time did it through Moo, and it was like the easiest. Like we did the save the date card, and then we did the card, and it was just the invitation and the response, and that was it. And I'm like, wow, that was like mind blowing. Like how much less paper that was.
Oh my gosh, if I had done so, yeah, this I'm in my second marriage too. And if I had spent as much time on the relationship of the first
Right?
marriage as I did on the stationery, like, well, I probably just would have broken up. But um but like, my attention was definitely in the wrong place. And yeah, when I got married the second time, we eloped, and I let my and we were already going down to Florida to Palm Beach. And I, after the first experience, I felt like I don't want to even think about the wedding. I just want to be married. And so I let my mother-in-law do it all. And
Oh,
I know she had two sons. She was like, great, I love it. And so we started off on the right foot, and we've been married 17 years.
congrats. Yeah, we decided to go. We had it and it was weird because we got married October 9, 2019, right before the pandemic shut down. And I said to him, like, instead of putting all this money, talk about a sideline outside. This just went the total opposite direction. But I was like, instead of putting all the money into the a venue that you spend literally 24 hours, if 24 hours, and it's like tens of thousands of dollars, it's like, why don't we just put the money into our backyard and we'll have it in our backyard? So we did, and we put out decomposed granite, and we did a fire pit and had the deck, and then we put in another area with grass, and we did the wedding in our backyard. And we had, our neighbors were lovely because our backyard's big, but for 100 people it's not that big to be able to have the event. And so our neighbors let us have the reception around their beautiful pool, and we did a taco bar and a margarita bar and a mariachi band, and it was amazing. It was probably like the best decision ever, and it was so fun. It was casual, it wasn't stuffy, and it wasn't, it's like, man, like talk about like changing, like what your priority is, and like really it was really about us. Wow,
I
I
love
really
it.
just took that and totally
No, I love that.
that's
And
hilarious.
I'm sure, like, any money you sunk into landscaping or improving your backyard, you got to enjoy it during COVID
Oh
when
my,
you
it was the best. It was, Sarah, it was the best. We already had vegetable gardens, but we ate out of our backyard garden like almost the entire time because we had so much lettuce and tomatoes. But to sit back there with, because we're by LAX, no airplanes flying over, with a fire going in the backyard. We have like a cowboy style hot tub, like one of those horse troughs that my husband turned into a hot tub that
Cool.
sit on the deck. I mean, it was the best investment ever, like hands down. That's enough.
That's
I can talk about
awesome.
that.
That's awesome. You dodged a calendar bullet by getting married when you did. And we actually did my daughter got bat mitzvahed in June of 2019. So we also dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so glad I had her when I did.
Oh my gosh, I feel so much bad for people that like cancellations of weddings, and good God.
Yeah,
I'm gonna bring the conversation back to
that's fine. No
tell me
problem.
tell me about some of the stationery trends that you love that are coming up for fourth quarter.
It's such an interesting time. As I mentioned before, we're in a time of social upheaval, and like, things are changing, things are staying the same. Right now, it's sort of an anything goes market, and it's
Hmm.
really, really, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like, never before, I think, how when you talk to retailers and they're like, my customers won't buy that. My customers will buy this. This is what,
Yeah.
everybody knows like what their game is. And I think they're just polishing it up, and they're, sort of you know, they're sort of really able to deliver what their specific clientele is seeking. And it's never been a better time to just like sort of like lean into your vibe and embrace it. That being said, within stationery, I think, there's a lot of difficult conversations I think that people are having on a personal level, in families, in relationships, as so much is changing. And so it's really the job of the stationery maker to like kind of facilitate those conversations. So like I see a lot of that. And it
Like
doesn't really.
what's an example? Because I know
Oh,
people are going
okay,
to ask.
absolutely. I know it's very esoteric. Like, okay, so quotations, which is a really cool line. It's spelled quotate. It's Kwotation. The maker, her name is Janine Quo. So she has a card that just says, "Yay, you have a new pronoun." So it's like, okay, your friend is, your friend, has told you they're gender fluid. So like, how do I have that conversation? Like, I don't know if I even really completely understand what that means, but I want them to know I'm here for them, and I want them
I love
to,
that.
yeah. And so like she does this and she makes this card, and it just makes that a little easier, and to just negotiate that. And like you said, for divorce, for coming out, for sobriety, for adoption, for your dog dying, for all these things that, or for menopause is like a super hot
Oh my gosh. Thank God.
thing. Super hot in every sense of the word, including hot flashes.
Do you
Uh,
think that people are touching subjects now that no one would cover in cards? Because when I
yes.
was growing up, it was happy birthday, happy anniversary, deepest sympathy. I mean, do you think now that the way the world is, it's like, stationery can cover everything? I mean,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
before it never touched those.
Yeah, yeah. It's starting to happen. I just had Emily McDowell
Love
on
her.
Wonderful. She's amazing. And she was like, well, Gen Xers and boomers, our parents didn't talk to us about anything. It was always everything's fine. And cards were more of it was a social exchange. You send out Christmas cards, you send out Easter cards, you send out thank yous. But it wasn't about exchanging ideas or helping
Or
people,
F-bombs.
right, or
Her
F-bombs, or
her
just
mug, everything's fine, everything's there, everything's not fucking fine.
right. So she's like, look, we need to talk about these things. So she definitely redefined stationery with her empathy range. And that's been 10 years ago and already. And I think different makers are picking up that sort of that evolution, as they see it. Or there's this one fabulous line. You probably saw them at New York Now. That's so Andrew. His whole thing is cards,
No,
for the girls, the gays, and the theys.
I love it.
It's just new ways of connecting and communicating. And my generation, your generation, we're not, it doesn't come as naturally to us. But this young generation, I have a Zoomer, my daughter's a Zoomer. It's just like they're so different. And so hopefully the hope is that they pick up the medium and make it theirs, and
Yeah.
so it can continue to evolve and function.
I love watching how Zoomers are taking and changing just retail as a scope and how they do business. And I think that's the coolest thing to watch, and to be open-minded enough and love how they're doing it differently. I think that it's kind of hard for some people. I don't think that it's easily accepted. But do you find, this is my last question. I mean, I have two more questions for you, but
That's
on
okay.
business wise, because I touched on F-bombs, for the industry, I had a pharmacy. I talk about this a lot. They're a 5-chain pharmacy, and the F-bomb things from Chez Gannets, fuck this glass, and blue cues, F-bomb stuff. Like F-bomb is like sold extremely well. Like, unfortunately, as a good buyer does, you follow the sales, and I followed it a little too far, and it was like I was all in. But do you find it? Do you find it still being a trend that people are still putting out, or do you feel like people are kind of backing off that now, like the snarky and more a little bit nice and kinder, and
Ooh, it's hard to say. I mean, like there was a time when you could just letterpress the word fuck on a card and it was like, wow. I think
shake on
I
you?
yeah. But I mean, like she's had to evolve her game too. Like if the copy, kind of takes you somewhere that you're not expecting, which Alex is so good at
Yeah,
doing. Like I think one of her glasses is "Welcome to the Shit Show."
I
It's
love
like,
her.
I know she's amazing. And, so it's like we're swearing, but we're sort of thoughtfully swearing. Like, I think, and she's like a master of it. And there are others who really know how to like drop those bombs. It's so funny you would say that because, I'm in production with the spring issue of Stationery Trends, and I run cards with fuck shit. I'm reflecting what the market.
Yeah.
So there's some swear words in there. And we do occasionally get advertisers who get really upset. So we put stars. It's crazy to.
Over the you.
Right. It's like, come
Yeah.
on, everybody knows what it is. But I just had a thing back and forth with my art director where I ran a bitch, and she was like, do we need to do this? And I was like, I don't think so, because that word is like on TV. It's on, like, that bitch is,
Yeah.
pretty
It's a female
omnipresent.
dog.
Right. And people use it everywhere. I mean, like it's in Britney Spears songs, and it's just like everywhere. So I was like, I don't think we need to do bitch is okay, fucking shit no. So like we had an editorial discussion. I was like, let me check with Julie, my editorial director, make sure we're on the same page. But yeah, that was the agreement. I mean, we don't want to offend anybody. And
No.
um
It's funny because obviously with the name retail whore, like I've had, like, even stupid Facebook, like I can have retail whore as our name for Instagram, but Facebook wouldn't let us. Like Facebook, we had, like, Elisa had to use a phonetic whore, like instead of the actual word. So stupid. And I mean, she literally had to go to Facebook. We went to Facebook jail, I guess. And then she had to go to Facebook court and, say, go to the podcast, listen to it. We're not a prostitution site. But I have people all the time, Sarah, that ghost me because obviously, because, it's like, I get it, but I have to, I had to ask that question about the F-bomb because it still sells and you still see it, but I can't understand that people do give pushback, but it's like, it's still trending, people. Got news for you.
you're a whore and you went on trial for it.
I know. And look at shirt I'm wearing.
I love your shirt, by the way.
I know
Yeah,
there's a guy I follow that wears this t-shirt and I'm like, I need that sweatshirt.
I love it. But look, I mean, that's part of it. Their power is that they still piss people off. If everybody accepted them,
Yeah.
there would be no power in these words. And we need, you need that.
Power and words. I love
You
that.
know, you need to be able to flex that thoughtfully. Just as Alex at Shea Gagné.
I love her. I'm hounding her like there's no tomorrow for the podcast because I mean, I've bought her line forever. She's friends with one of my accounts. So I'm like, look, lady, like we need you on the podcast.
Totally.
Last two questions are what I say, you are very creative and you have a creative job. How and where do you find inspiration?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, really, I look for it. I look for it everywhere. Now, I live in beautiful Beechwood, Ohio, which is not like on the cutting edge of culture by any means. But I'm a big reader. I don't go to too many stores, but I'm always looking for stuff. I have to say, like, we mentioned Zoomers a minute ago. Like, I find my daughter like a fascinating subject because that generation is so different than
Yeah,
I was, and she really does see the world so differently. Like,
100% they do.
um, so she gives me a lot of ideas and she keeps me like on my toes in terms of like, oh mom, nobody's doing that. Oh mom, like that kind of stuff. Um, so I get a lot from watching her and her friends just like interact and how they communicate and the kinds of stuff she's drawn to. I mean, we have totally different tastes. Like, I wish she would let me dress her. I always say it was like my saddest day when she turned 5 and wouldn't let me pick out her clothes anymore. I think women dream of dressing a child, and like if you get one that's like, in my case, I got one like me who just like has her own ideas, but
Yeah, my
they're
mom too.
yeah, but they're just so different than mine. I watch her very closely because I feel like they're the consumers of the future, and um, they're really, they're really driving like where we're going. And
Yeah.
I ask her to explain a lot of stuff, and she gets really mad at me.
God,
I'll be
mom.
like, I know. Like my husband, Rick, and my husband and I will be like, well, what's gender fluid? What does that mean? They want to be they. Okay, I have no problem calling them they, but what does that mean? And she'll just like get really irritated with us.
Well, while you're saying that, what is the on Instagram that he, she, or the she, her? Please explain that.
I'm like probably not the best person.
You have to ask your daughter for me, please, or
I
somebody
know.
who's watching this, please, because I'm like, I don't understand, and I want to understand, but I don't understand. So
Right, right.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
have
want to, and I want to, you know, I want to address people the correct way, but
yeah,
yeah, it's not it's not as clear. In journalism school, I was taught that when you write an article, someone needs to come away from it with a clear understanding of whatever it is you're writing about. And I feel like the journalists writing about this topic have just done people our age a huge disservice because
it's got to be someone that generation writing it. I mean, for
right,
sure. Like
right.
that can't even.
But it is a beautiful thing, and I think anything where people are like, this feels more like me, I think that's a good thing. When I had conversations with her about uh about where people are at with that, I just say, look, imagine how horrible it would be if you felt like you were in the wrong body. Like, it's just all about making accepting people
Yeah,
on their own terms.
which I love. I
Yeah.
wish I hope that, and I love the fact that there's cards now, and there's like I love that, like all inclusivity, like that's super important. Um, then my last question is your biggest piece of advice to a retailer that is thinking about going into stationery, card, paper, any of that part of the gift divisions.
Right. That would have more of like a home or gift type of approach, that, with that kind of merchandise.
Well, just anybody that's like thinking about it, like they've heard this, like, what is your best advice about like venturing into that world? Because, as you know, there are a shit ton of card lines, and it's like, I mean, I have my style of cards that I love. I mean, I love everything from rifle to McDowell to, I mean, like, but there's a lot to look at. So what is your advice for someone's just dipping toe
Just
into it?
getting their feet in. I would consider incorporating some kind of card wall into your store. I think they're interesting, and they can be updated so often that every person who walks in your store is looking for what's new. Well, if there's something different there, I think that that's a really nice way to do it. It's a nice way to bring in different makers, like if you're trying to connect with a certain audience. And then of course there's the whole area of the desk, which is just like such an interesting category in stationery, as people are just working all over the place.
Yeah.
Some people are at home, some people are back in the office, some people are on the go. So, we need these great pieces that can go from place to place, but that are also sort of like beautiful and useful in and of themselves. So, the journals, the pens, paperweights, that to me, that really straddles the line between home and stationary.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, um, I was in the mud pie showroom, and I was telling Michelle, like, you guys should do a big push for desk. I mean, you guys do so much tabletop. You should do some nested trays. I mean, like, how cool would those be
Yeah.
for desk? And then if I had a home store, if you want to get into the more high-end stuff, then you bring in like, custom cards and flat notes. One way, especially if you're more of a high end store, I mean, you mentioned people writing good clients. One way to get people to want something is by bringing it into their life. So after you've done, some work for someone, sitting down and writing them a really thoughtful thank you on double thick paper that's hand painted and personalized, and sending it to them. They've already forgotten. You send them this nice follow-up, and they see this item, and they also want it, for their friends. And so, then you go and build that sale. And every time they want to reorder, guess what? They're going to be back. So, there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, there's so many great, it seems like in home, there is a real push towards, kind of slow living and experiencing moments, and really
Mhm.
slowing down. Stationery is so great for that. If you're really writing someone, what's that? There's a quote where like writing a letter is the best way of being alone and with someone. It's like,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, believe me, the original person said it a lot better, but it's, you're really slowing down and connecting with this person. How I'm going to connect with you in a letter is going to be different than a phone call, a text, or a Zoom. Like, what do I really want to say? And then you put it out there. It's a beautiful way to connect. I think people are rediscovering it. Is it ever gonna take over again? No, but it's this beautiful way
I don't
to connect.
know. I don't know, Sarah. And not to go down this road right now, but there is a podcast. It's he and she, it's Lauren Bostick and her husband,
Mhm.
and they've had on a couple people talking about how attached everybody is to their phones, and she said, I honestly think that a lot of people are going to return to not the phone, and going back to ways that people used to communicate, that is a slower style of communication. So I like to think
Mhm.
that we are going back to a slower, lost or art form of communicating via writing.
Yeah, I mean, please do. I would love that. And a great, I'm trying to see if I have any custom notes here. A great custom note is, that's personal branding. And if everybody's sending an email, like, let me send the personal card that's beautifully written. And
Love you had boxes of stationery.
I know. So this was a gift from Crane many years ago, and I still have some. That they did this. This is, oh, that this is engraved. It says Sarah, and they were kind enough to send me the plate so that I can literally
Wow.
take it. I can literally take it and
Go Crane.
stay. I know. Wait, am I holding it upside down? Yes. But I don't know if you can see it, but
I
that's my
love that.
name. That's the plate, and then
So
you
could
know
you take that to a letter house, a press house, and
I
say,
think so. I should be able to take, and this is they
I
make
love
it
the
warranty
inside
line. envelopes. Like if I want to thank someone, like let me send this instead of an email or a text and like just knock their socks off. And show them that I'm really thinking of them, and you know um and give them a beautiful object, in a world of inflation and supply chain issues. Like I think we enjoy this little splurge a little more maybe than we would have pre-COVID.
Agreed. Thank you so much for your time here on the podcast. I loved having a chance to talk to you, and I can't wait to hear everybody's responses to this. And it's hopefully this is coming out during show season, so everyone go out and take a look at stationery and journals and desk objects, and think about a different way of communicating.
Absolutely. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, just draw me a line, sarah@thepapernerd.com, SARAH. I'd love to hear from you.
And
And
we will have all the links in the show notes. And your
awesome.
podcast, name your podcast one more time.
It is the Paperfold. So please check that out. Usually wherever you listen to your favorite pod platform. And but it was such a joy coming on here and connecting with you. I can only hope that we're going to connect in real life.
Yes, yes, yes.